A billionaire in a Rolls-Royce heard a beggar say Merry Christmas. When she looked closer, she recognized the man who saved her life. Listen to me. There's a moment in life when the universe puts you face to face with your past. When the person you thought you'd never see again appears like a ghost from another lifetime. When everything you've become collides with everything you used to be. That's where our story begins. But it doesn't end there. What you're about to hear will shatter you. It will make you weep. It will make you question how society treats the people who give everything for others. But by the end of this, you'll understand what it truly means to remember, and to be remembered. 20 years ago, a little girl sat alone in a school cafeteria with an empty lunch bag. She had nothing. No food, no friends, no hope. But she had one teacher who saw her. Really saw her. And that teacher made a choice. A choice that would cost him everything he had but would save a life in ways he would never know. Fast forward to Christmas Eve, and a Rolls-Royce glides through snow-covered streets. Inside sits a billionaire, powerful, polished, untouchable. Outside, in the freezing shadows, a homeless man in tattered clothes calls out to passing strangers. Happy Merry Christmas. The neighborhood barely notices him. He's invisible. One of society's forgotten. But when that billionaire hears his voice, something inside her stops cold. Today, I'm going to tell you everything. The hunger, the sacrifice, the fall from grace, and the reunion that changed both their lives forever. Stay with me, because this story will change how you see kindness forever. But before we dive in, I need you to do 3 things for me right now. First, subscribe to this channel and turn on that notification bell. Because once you hear this story, you'll want to hear every single story of hope and redemption we have waiting for you. These are the stories the world needs right now. Second, give this video a like. It takes 1 second, and it tells me you're invested in this journey with me. It means everything. Third, comment below and tell me, who was the person who believed in you when no one else did? I want to know. I want to hear your story too. Okay, let's begin. Her name was Malia Carter. Not just Malia Carter the billionaire. Not Malia Carter the tech mogul whose face graces magazine covers, and whose company revolutionized an entire industry. Before all of that, she was just Malia. A little black girl with second-hand clothes, holes in her shoes, and an empty stomach. When our story really starts, she was 10 years old. 10 years old and absolutely terrified. She attended Lincoln Elementary, but not because her family could afford it. She was there on a diversity scholarship, a token, some would say. A charity case in a school full of children whose parents drove luxury cars and owned vacation homes. Malia's mother, Patricia Carter, worked 3 jobs. 3 jobs just to keep a roof over their heads and the lights on. She left before sunrise and came home after dark. There was never enough money. Never enough time. Never enough of anything. So Malia went to school hungry most days. Not just a little hungry. The kind of hungry that makes your stomach cramp and your head dizzy. The kind of hungry that makes you feel invisible, worthless, less than human. And the other children? They knew. Children always know. They smelled her poverty like blood in the water. They circled her like sharks, waiting for the moment to strike, waiting for the perfect opportunity to remind her that she didn't belong. Her clothes were too big, hand-me-downs from donation bins. Her shoes had duct tape holding the soles together. Her lunch bag was empty, always empty, and she would pretend she wasn't hungry, pretend she didn't care, pretend the gnawing pain in her belly didn't exist. But you can only pretend for so long, can't you? The cruelest of them all was a girl named Jessica Hartwell. Jessica wore designer clothes. Jessica had perfect hair. Jessica's father owned half the commercial real estate in the city, and Jessica made sure everyone knew it. Jessica had made it her personal mission to destroy Malia Carter. Every day, she had a new insult. Every day, a new humiliation. And Malia took it all because she had no choice. Speaking up meant risking her scholarship. Fighting back meant losing everything. But then came the day that changed everything. It was lunchtime. December. Christmas decorations hung in the cafeteria, paper snowflakes, strings of lights, the cruel irony of holiday cheer surrounding Malia's private hell. She sat alone, as always, at the corner table. Her lunch bag sat in front of her, flat and empty. She stared at it, willing it to magically fill with food, knowing it wouldn't. That's when Jessica approached. Jessica snatched the lunch bag off the table, held it up high, and shook it in front of the entire cafeteria. "Look, everyone." Jessica's voice rang out, cruel and delighted. "Malia's lunch bag is empty again. What's the matter, Malia? Mommy too poor to feed you? Or did she forget you exist?" Laughter erupted. Not just from Jessica's circle of friends, but from dozens of children. Mocking, vicious laughter that echoed off the cafeteria walls. Malia wanted to die. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to sink through the floor and never come back. Her eyes burned with tears, but she refused to cry. Not here. Not in front of them. And then, a voice cut through the laughter. "Jessica Hartwell, that's enough." Everyone turned. Mr. Smith Wilson stood there. Malia's 5th grade teacher. A quiet man in his 40s with kind eyes and a gentle manner. He wasn't the type of teacher who raised his voice or commanded attention through fear. But in that moment, his voice carried authority that silenced the entire room. He walked over to Malia's table, carrying his own lunch bag. He sat down beside her, right beside her in front of everyone, and opened his lunch. "Sharing food is what good people do," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. Then quieter, just to Malia, "You're not alone. Not anymore." He split his sandwich in half and handed her one piece. He gave her his apple. He gave her his cookies. And he stayed there, eating lunch with her, while the cafeteria slowly returned to its normal noise level and Jessica Hartwell slunk away, defeated. That moment, that single moment of kindness, planted something in Malia's heart. Not just gratitude. Something bigger. Hope. The belief that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't worthless after all. Hit subscribe now if you're feeling this story, because what happens next will blow your mind. But Mr. Smith Wilson didn't stop there. That wasn't a one-time gesture. That wasn't some feel-good moment that ended when lunch period was over. For the next 2 years, 2 entire years, Smith Wilson shared his lunch with Malia almost every single day. Not because he had extra. Not because he could afford to. Because he chose to go hungry so she wouldn't have to. His wife, Clara Wilson, noticed. She noticed him losing weight. She noticed him coming home exhausted, irritable from low blood sugar. She noticed him skipping dinner some nights, claiming he'd eaten a big lunch. But Smith never told her the truth. Never explained where his food was going. Because if he told her, she might ask him to stop. And he couldn't stop. Not when he saw Malia's face light up every day at lunch. Not when he watched her grades improve because she could finally concentrate in class. Not when he heard her laugh for the first time. He tutored her after school for free. He defended her when other teachers wrote her off as a troubled kid from a troubled home. He told her something no one else had ever told her. "You're destined for greatness, Malia. Don't let them tell you otherwise." She carried those words like a lifeline. And then came the incident that nearly destroyed everything. In her 6th grade year, Malia was accused of stealing. A designer watch went missing from Jessica Hartwell's locker, and Jessica immediately pointed the finger at Malia. Who else would steal it? Jessica had said to the principal, "She's poor. She needs money. It's obvious." The evidence was circumstantial. The accusation was cruel. But the school board believed it because it fit the narrative they'd already written about Malia Carter, troubled kid from the wrong side of town. Her scholarship was revoked pending investigation. Malia's world collapsed. But Smith Wilson fought back. He investigated on his own time. He interviewed students. He checked security footage. He discovered that Jessica had actually lost the watch at a party and blamed Malia to cover her own carelessness. Smith presented the evidence to the school board. He vouched for Malia's character. He put his own reputation on the line. The scholarship was reinstated. Malia was cleared. But Smith's relationship with the administration was never the same. He'd made enemies by refusing to let an innocent child be destroyed. Some colleagues called him naive. Others called him a troublemaker. He didn't care. Because Malia was safe. That's all that mattered. When Malia graduated from 6th grade and moved on to middle school, she hugged Mr. Smith Wilson and cried. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything. I'll never forget you." He smiled, that gentle smile that had seen her through so many dark days. "You're going to do amazing things, Malia. I can't wait to see who you become." She sent him a thank you card that summer. She meant to stay in touch. She really did. But life got in the way. Middle school became high school. High school became college. College became internships, then startups, then success beyond her wildest dreams. And somewhere along the way, Smith Wilson faded into memory. A beautiful memory, yes. A formative memory. But a memory nonetheless. She tried to find him years later. Searched social media. Called the school. They told her he'd retired a decade ago. No forwarding information. No way to reach him. She assumed he was living happily somewhere, enjoying retirement with his wife, surrounded by grandchildren. She had no idea how wrong she was. Because while Malia Carter was building her empire, Smith Wilson was losing everything. It started with Clara. His beloved wife, his partner of 25 years, began complaining of headaches. Then fatigue. Then pain that wouldn't go away. The diagnosis came like a death sentence. Stage 4 cancer. Aggressive. Fast-moving. Almost certainly terminal. But Smith refused to accept it. He researched experimental treatments. He found specialists. He mortgaged their home to pay for therapies not covered by insurance. For 3 years, they fought. For 3 years, Clara endured chemo radiation, surgeries that bought her months instead of years. And for 3 years, Smith watched their savings evaporate, their retirement fund disappear, their future crumble. On a cold February morning, Clara Wilson died in her husband's arms. Her last words were, "I'm sorry we couldn't grow old together." His last words to her were, "I failed you." He meant it. In that moment, Smith Wilson felt like he'd failed at the one thing that mattered most, protecting the person he loved. If this story is hitting you in the heart, drop a like right now. We're just getting started. The grief nearly killed him. But the financial devastation finished the job. While Smith was consumed with Clara's care, while he was sitting in hospital rooms and signing consent forms and watching his wife fade away, something else was happening. The investment firm managing his teacher's pension, 30 years of contributions, 30 years of security, collapsed in a massive fraud scandal. The executives fled the country. The funds evaporated. Thousands of retirees lost everything. Smith Wilson was one of them. He lost his pension. He lost his savings. And because he'd mortgaged the house for Clara's treatment, he lost that too when he couldn't make the payments. 6 months after Clara's death, Smith Wilson stood outside the home they'd shared for 2 decades with a single suitcase and a photo album. The bank had foreclosed. The locks had been changed. He had nowhere to go. He was 63 years old. Too proud to ask former colleagues for help. Too ashamed to reach out to former students. Too broken to fight anymore. He slept in his car until the car was repossessed for missed payments. And then he was on the streets. The descent was fast. Faster than he ever imagined possible. Depression wrapped around him like chains. He stopped shaving. Stopped caring. Stopped believing he deserved anything better. He became one of society's invisible. One of the forgotten. One of the people others step over without a second glance. Former students passed him on the street and didn't recognize him. Former colleagues crossed to the other side of the road. He became a ghost in his own city. And every night, when he found a doorway or an alley or a shelter bed, Smith Wilson would remember the children he'd taught. He'd remember the difference he thought he'd made. And he'd wonder if any of it had mattered at all. Now on Christmas Eve, 20 years after that lunchroom moment, 2 lives are about to collide again. Malia Carter sits in the back of her Rolls-Royce, returning from a charity gala where she just donated $1 million to educational programs for underprivileged children. She's wearing a designer gown. Diamond earrings. Her braids are styled perfectly. Her company's latest valuation just hit the news, $3.2 billion. She is everything the world told her she could never be. The car glides through streets decorated with Christmas lights. Snow falls gently. Carolers sing on corners. The city glows with holiday magic. And then from the shadows beside a closed storefront, a voice calls out, "Happy Merry Christmas." It's hoarse. Desperate. The voice of someone who hasn't had a real conversation in days. Malia almost ignores it. Her driver starts to accelerate. But something in that voice stops her cold. Something familiar. Something that reaches across 20 years and touches a memory buried deep in her heart. Wait, she tells her driver. Stop the car. He does, confused. The street is empty except for the figure in the shadows. Malia's hand trembles as she reaches for the window button. The window glides down. Cold air rushes into the warm interior. Snow drifts inside. The homeless man approaches slowly, hopefully. He's wearing layers of tattered clothes, a blanket wrapped around his shoulders. His beard is long and unkempt. His face is weathered by years of exposure to the elements. But his eyes. Malia stares at those eyes. And her entire world stops. Subscribe now, you need to see how this ends. Click that bell. Mr. Smith. Her voice cracks. Mr. Smith Wilson? From Lincoln Elementary. The man squints at her, confused. His mind, clouded by trauma and survival, struggles to process the question. I'm sorry, do I know you? Malia's door opens. Her driver protests, but she's already stepping out, her heels clicking on the frozen sidewalk. She stands before him, this man who saved her, and tears stream down her face. It's me, she whispers. It's Malia. Malia Carter. You used to give me your lunch. You told me I was smart when everyone else called me stupid. You told me I was destined for greatness when I thought I was worth nothing. Smith Wilson's weathered face goes still. Memory flickers behind his eyes. Malia. His voice breaks. Little Malia? And in that moment, 20 years collapse into nothing. The successful billionaire sees her 10-year-old self sitting alone with an empty lunch bag. The homeless teacher sees the frightened little girl he once protected. You became. He can't finish. His voice is choked with emotion. Because of you, Malia says, stepping closer. Everything I am is because of you. Snow falls around them. Christmas lights twinkle. And two people, separated by wealth, status, circumstance, embrace like the family they became in a school cafeteria 2 decades ago. The crowd that's gathering doesn't understand what they're witnessing. But they're about to find out. Because Malia Carter never forgot the man who saved her life. And tonight, on Christmas Eve, she's about to save his. The story continues. Stay with me. The window slid down. Cold December air rushed into the warm cocoon of the car, carrying with it the smell of snow and exhaust and something else, something harder to name. The smell of survival. The smell of streets. The beggar approached slowly, hope flickering in eyes that had learned not to expect much from passing cars. His face was weathered like old leather, his beard unkempt and streaked with gray. He wore layers of tattered clothing, a green hoodie under a gray blanket that he clutched around his shoulders. His hands were red and raw from the cold. But those eyes. Even through the beard, even through the years and the hardship, Malia knew those eyes. She had looked into those eyes when she was 10 years old and drowning in despair, and they had thrown her a lifeline. Her voice came out as a whisper, then stronger. Mr. Smith? Mr. Smith Wilson from Lincoln Elementary. The beggar squinted at her, confusion crossing his weathered face. His mouth opened, but no words came. The years of trauma, the loss, the streets had clouded something in him. He struggled to place this elegant woman in the back of a Rolls-Royce with a memory of anyone he'd ever known. But Malia was already moving. The door opened. Her designer heels clicked against the frozen pavement as she stepped out into the snow. People walking past began to slow down. Heads turned. Someone whispered, "Is that Malia Carter?" She didn't care. She stood before the beggar, this man wrapped in rags, and tears were already streaming down her face, hot against the cold air. "Mr. Smith, it's me. It's Malia. Malia from your 5th grade class. You used to share your lunch with me. You used to tell me I was smart when everyone else made me feel stupid. You saved my life, Mr. Smith. You saved my life." And then something shifted in the beggar's hollow eyes. Something sparked. A memory surfacing from deep water. 20 years earlier. A different lifetime. A different world. 10-year-old Malia Carter sat alone at the lunch table in the Lincoln Elementary cafeteria, her empty lunch bag in front of her like an accusation. Around her, the cafeteria buzzed with the sounds of privilege, laughter, trading of snacks, the crinkle of expensive packaging, the chatter of children who had never known hunger. Malia wore a donated sweater that was too big for her and jeans with a patch on the knee. Her shoes had holes in them. She'd stuffed cardboard inside that morning so her socks wouldn't get wet walking to school. She was the only scholarship student in her grade. The only poor child in a sea of wealth. And everyone knew it. The worst of them was Jessica Hartwell. Jessica had everything: the newest clothes, the most friends, the loudest laugh, and the cruelest tongue. She was 11 years old and already an expert in finding weak spots and pressing on them until they bled. That day, Jessica and her friends approached Malia's table. Malia tried to make herself smaller, tried to become invisible. It never worked. "What's in your lunch bag today, Malia?" Jessica asked, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Malia said nothing. She stared at the table. Jessica reached over and snatched the lunch bag. She opened it with exaggerated curiosity, peering inside. Then she turned it upside down and shook it. Nothing fell out. Because there was nothing inside. There never was. "Oh my God!" Jessica shrieked with theatrical surprise. "It's empty. Again. Does your mom even feed you? Oh wait, I forgot. Your mom is too busy working as a janitor to pack you lunch." The cafeteria grew quieter. Other children turned to watch. Some laughed. Some looked away, uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. This was entertainment. This was the social hierarchy being reinforced. This was how the world worked at Lincoln Elementary. Malia felt her face burning. Tears pricked at her eyes, but she wouldn't cry. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction. She had cried before, and it only made things worse. "Maybe you should just stay home," Jessica continued. "I mean, what's the point of coming to school if you can't even afford to eat? You don't belong here." Malia wanted to disappear. She wanted the floor to open up and swallow her. She wanted to cease to exist. And then a voice cut through the cruelty. A man's voice, calm but firm. "That's enough, Jessica." Smith Wilson, the fifth-grade teacher, stood at the edge of the cafeteria. He wasn't Malia's teacher, she was in Ms. Anderson's class, but he'd been on lunch duty that day. He walked over to their table with measured steps, and something in his expression made Jessica take a step back. "Apologize to Malia," Mr. Wilson said quietly. "But I didn't. Apologize. Now." Jessica mumbled something that might have been an apology and scurried away with her friends. Mr. Wilson sat down across from Malia. He opened his own lunchbox, a simple brown paper bag. Inside was a sandwich, an apple, and a bag of chips. He looked at Malia for a long moment, really looked at her, like she was a person worth seeing. Then he split his sandwich in half and pushed it across the table toward her. He placed the apple beside it. He kept only the chips for himself. "Sharing food is what good people do," he said, loud enough for the other children to hear. Then quieter just for her, "You don't have to eat alone, Malia. Not while I'm here." Malia stared at the food. Her stomach growled. Tears finally spilled down her cheeks, but they were different tears now. She picked up the sandwich with shaking hands and took a bite. It was the best thing she'd ever tasted, not because of what it was, but because of what it meant. Someone had seen her. Someone had chosen her. Someone had decided she was worth protecting. That moment planted a seed in Malia's heart. A seed that would grow into everything she would become. That lunch wasn't an isolated incident. It became a pattern. A ritual. A lifeline. Almost every day for the next 2 years, Smith Wilson shared his lunch with Malia Carter. Sometimes it was half a sandwich. Sometimes it was fruit or crackers or whatever he'd brought that day. He never made a big deal of it. He would just sit down, split his food, and they would eat together while he asked her about her classes, her homework, her dreams. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" he asked her one day. Malia had shrugged. "I don't know. Nobody like me becomes anything." "That's not true," Mr. Wilson said firmly. "You're brilliant, Malia. I see your test scores. I see how hard you work. You can become anything you want. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Those words became an anchor for her. When the other children mocked her, when her mother came home too exhausted to speak, when the electricity got shut off again and they sat in the dark, Malia remembered what Mr. Wilson had said. "You're brilliant. You can become anything. But there was a cost to his kindness that Malia didn't know about until years later. Smith Wilson went hungry. Nearly every day, he gave away more than half his lunch. He went home in the afternoons feeling lightheaded, his stomach cramping. He lost weight. His wife, Clara, noticed. "Honey, are you feeling okay?" she asked him one evening. "You've lost at least 10 pounds. "I'm fine," he told her. "Just busy at work." He never told her about Malia. He never told anyone. Because helping someone shouldn't be a performance. It should just be something you do. Then came the scholarship crisis. In Malia's 6th grade year, a designer watch went missing from another student's locker. Jessica Hartwell, still bitter about being called out by Mr. Wilson 2 years earlier, accused Malia of stealing it. The accusation was absurd. Malia had never stolen anything in her life, but it spread through the school like wildfire. The poor scholarship student stealing from the wealthy kids. It fit too neatly into the narrative people wanted to believe. The school board convened a disciplinary hearing. They were ready to revoke Malia's scholarship and expel her. Her mother sat in the hearing, terrified and helpless, unable to afford a lawyer or even to take time off work. Smith Wilson fought for her. He stood before the school board and presented evidence. Malia's perfect disciplinary record, character statements from other teachers, the inconsistencies in Jessica's accusation. He demanded they investigate properly. He refused to let them destroy this child's future based on prejudice and lies. The watch turned up a week later in Jessica's gym bag, right where she'd left it. The accusation was dropped. Malia's scholarship was restored. But the school board didn't forget Smith Wilson's challenge to their authority. His relationship with the administration became strained. His opportunities for advancement evaporated. He didn't care. He had saved Malia's future, and that was what mattered. On the last day of 6th grade, Mr. Wilson pulled Malia aside. "You're going to do great things," he told her, his hand on her shoulder. "You're destined for greatness, Malia. Don't let them tell you otherwise." Malia hugged him, something she'd never done before. "Thank you, Mr. Smith. For everything. I'll never forget you." She meant it with all her heart. But life has a way of pulling people apart. Malia went on to middle school, then high school. She sent Mr. Wilson one thank you card that summer. After that, caught up in the chaos of growing up, scholarships, college applications, survival, they lost touch. She assumed he was fine. She assumed he'd retired happily, lived a good life. She had no idea what was coming for him. If this story is hitting you, take a second to like this video and subscribe. Stories like Smith's need to be heard. We need to remember the people who save us before it's too late. While Malia climbed, Smith Wilson fell. And he fell hard. It started with Clara's diagnosis. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctor's words landed like a bomb in their quiet life. Terminal, aggressive, months not years. Smith sat in the hospital parking lot after that appointment and screamed until his voice gave out. Clara was his everything. His college sweetheart. His best friend. The woman who had supported him through 30 years of teaching, who had never complained when he came home with empty pockets because he'd given money to a student in need, who had loved him through everything. He couldn't lose her. He wouldn't. The insurance covered some of the treatment, but not the experimental trials. Not the specialists. Not the medications that might, maybe, possibly buy her more time. Smith liquidated their savings. He took out a second mortgage on their small house. He maxed out every credit card. He spent everything they had trying to save the woman he loved. For 3 years, Clara fought. She fought with every ounce of strength she had. And Smith fought beside her, holding her hand through chemotherapy, carrying her when she couldn't walk, reading to her when the pain was too much to bear. He took early retirement so he could care for her full-time. The pension would support them, he thought. They'd be okay. Clara died on a Tuesday morning in September, with Smith holding her hand and sunlight streaming through the hospital window. Her last words were, "You did everything you could. I love you." Smith whispered back, "I failed you. I'm sorry. I love you so much." She closed her eyes and didn't open them again. Something broke in Smith that day. Something fundamental. He had been a protector his entire life, protecting students, protecting his wife, protecting everyone he loved. And he had failed. Despite everything he'd sacrificed, despite all the money and time and prayers, Clara was gone. He buried her on a gray autumn day. Former students came. Former colleagues. They offered condolences and casseroles and empty words about God's plan. Smith smiled and thanked them, but inside he was hollow. Carved out. A shell of who he'd been. Then came the second blow. 3 months after Clara's funeral, Smith received a letter. The investment firm managing the teacher's pension fund had collapsed. Fraud. Embezzlement. The retirement he'd counted on, the money he'd earned over 30 years of service, was gone. Lost in a scandal that made headlines for a week and then disappeared, leaving thousands of retired teachers with nothing. Smith should have fought. Should have hired a lawyer, joined the class action lawsuit, demanded accountability. But he was too broken. Too tired. Too hollow inside. He let it go. What did it matter anymore? What did any of it matter? The medical debt came next. The hospital bills. The credit card statements. Collectors calling at all hours. Smith couldn't pay. He had nothing left to pay with. 6 months after Clara's death, the bank foreclosed on the house they'd lived in for 25 years. On a cold February morning, Smith stood outside his former home with one suitcase and a photo album. Everything else, furniture, books, memories, had been seized or sold. He had nowhere to go. No family left. His pride wouldn't let him call former colleagues or students. What would he say? How could he admit how far he'd fallen? He slept in his car for 3 months until the bank repossessed it too. Then he slept in shelters. Then, when the shelters were full, he slept on the streets. Depression wrapped around him like a fog he couldn't escape. Every morning he woke up and wondered why he'd bothered waking up at all. The man who had saved others couldn't save himself. The teacher who had told a little girl she was destined for greatness now begged for spare change just to eat. Smith Wilson became invisible. One of thousands of forgotten people living in the margins of a city that had no time for failure, no patience for poverty, no memory of the person he'd once been. And the world moved on without him. While Smith descended into darkness, Malia ascended into light. The foundation he'd given her, the belief that she mattered, the confidence that she could achieve anything, became the bedrock of everything she built. Every time someone told her she wasn't smart enough or came from the wrong neighborhood or didn't have the right connections, she heard Smith Wilson's voice, "You're brilliant. You're destined for greatness." She earned a full scholarship to State University. Studied computer science. Worked 2 jobs while carrying a full course load. Started coding in her dorm room at midnight, building applications, solving problems, seeing possibilities that others missed. By her junior year, she developed an algorithm that revolutionized data compression. By graduation, she had venture capital funding and a team. At 25, her company went public. At 30, she was a billionaire. Malia Carter became the face of tech innovation, the RagsToRiches story that everyone loved to tell. Magazine covers. TED Talks. Award ceremonies where powerful people praised her brilliance and determination. But success, real success, brought something unexpected: guilt. Malia never forgot where she came from. She established scholarship funds. She donated to schools. She gave to homeless shelters and food banks. But there was one person she'd been searching for, one debt she desperately wanted to repay. Smith Wilson. She hired investigators. They searched records, contacted the school district, tracked down former colleagues. Nothing. It was like he'd vanished. Malia assumed he'd retired quietly, maybe moved away, maybe didn't want to be found. She told herself he was happy somewhere, living the peaceful retirement he deserved. She had no idea he was 3 miles away, sleeping under a bridge. Christmas had always been difficult for Malia. It reminded her of those elementary school years, the holiday parties where other children showed off their new toys while she pretended she wasn't hungry. Even now, surrounded by wealth, the season carried a melancholy she couldn't shake. On Christmas Eve, she attended a charity gala. Another award for philanthropy. Another speech about giving back. She wore a designer gown and smiled for photos and wrote another check. But driving home through the decorated streets, watching families through lit windows, she felt the familiar emptiness. Until she heard that voice. Happy Merry Christmas. Not Merry Christmas. Happy Merry Christmas. The exact phrase Smith Wilson had always used, his own small twist on the traditional greeting. He'd said it to her every December morning when she arrived at school, cold and hungry and dreading another day. Happy Merry Christmas, Malia. You matter today. The voice reached across 20 years and stopped her heart. Christmas Eve. Present moment. Snow falling. Golden lights reflecting off the wet pavement. Malia Carter stepped out of her Rolls-Royce in her designer gown and approached the beggar in rags. The contrast was stark, almost obscene. She knelt beside him, oblivious to the cold pavement, the snow soaking into her dress, the crowd beginning to form. Tears streamed down her face. Mr. Smith, it's me. It's Malia. Malia Carter. You used to give me your lunch at Lincoln Elementary. You told me I was smart when everyone else called me stupid. You saved my life, Mr. Smith. You saved me. Smith Wilson's weathered face crumpled. His hollow eyes filled with tears. The fog in his mind began to clear, and memory flooded back like a dam breaking. He saw it, the frightened 10-year-old girl with holes in her shoes and hope in her eyes, now transformed into this powerful woman kneeling before him. Little Malia? His voice cracked. Is that really you? It's me, she sobbed. It's really me. Smith reached out with a trembling hand, touching her face as if to confirm she was real. You're all grown up. You made it. You became something. I became something because of you, Malia said fiercely. You saved me, Mr. Smith. You were the only one who believed in me. You gave me food when I was hungry. You gave me hope when I had none. You told me I mattered when the whole world told me I didn't. And I never forgot. I've been searching for you for years. They collapsed into each other's arms, two people separated by 20 years and a lifetime of experience, now reunited on a snowy street corner. The crowd watching grew larger. People held up phones, recording. Someone whispered, "That's Malia Carter. The billionaire. Why is she hugging that homeless guy?" Malia pulled back, keeping her hands on Smith's shoulders. She looked into his eyes, those same kind eyes she remembered, now hollowed by suffering she could barely imagine. "What happened to you?" she asked. "How did you end up here?" Smith tried to answer, but emotion choked him. He managed fragments. Clara, cancer. Lost everything. Couldn't. I'm sorry. No, Malia said firmly. Don't apologize. Don't you dare apologize. You have nothing to be sorry for. She stood, helping him to his feet. She turned to face the growing crowd, this gathering of strangers with their phones and their judgment. She didn't care what they thought. She only cared about this moment, this man, this debt that could never truly be repaid but had to be acknowledged. Malia's voice rang out clear and strong. This man saved me when I had nothing. He gave me hope when I wanted to disappear. He fought for me when everyone else had given up. And today, right now, I get to return the favor. What happens next went viral for a reason. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss stories that restore your faith in humanity. The crowd had grown to several dozen people. Traffic had slowed. Someone had called a news crew. But Malia Carter didn't care about any of it. She only cared about the man standing beside her, this forgotten hero who had saved her life 2 decades ago. She made her announcement public and deliberate. Mr. Smith Wilson will be the new director of youth mentorship at the Carter Foundation. He'll have a furnished apartment, complete medical care, and a salary befitting someone of his experience and character. Most importantly, he'll have the opportunity to do what he does best, inspire young people who need someone to believe in them. Smith shook his head, tears streaming into his beard. Malia, I can't accept this. I didn't help you because I wanted anything in return. I helped you because it was right. I know, Malia said softly. That's exactly why you deserve this. You once told me something, do you remember? You said, accepting help isn't weakness. It's wisdom. You told me that when I was too proud to take your sandwich. Now I'm telling you the same thing. Smith's resistance crumbled. His shoulders shook with sobs. I have nothing left to give. I'm broken. I'm not the man you remember. Malia embraced him again, holding him as he cried. Then let me help you remember who you are. Let me help you heal. Let me give you back a piece of what you gave me. Please, Mr. Smith. Let me do this." Finally, he nodded against her shoulder. The crowd erupted in applause and tears. Cameras flashed. Someone started singing Silent Night, and others joined in, this impromptu Christmas choir bearing witness to redemption playing out in real time. Malia's driver brought blankets from the car. They wrapped Smith in warmth. She guided him into the Rolls-Royce, this man who'd spent years sleeping on cold concrete now sitting in leather seats that cost more than most people's cars. He looked around, disoriented, as if he'd been transported to another planet. "It's okay," Malia whispered. "You're safe now. I've got you." As they drove away, Malia held his hand, and Smith cried quietly, releasing years of pain and shame and loneliness. He cried for Clara. He cried for the life he'd lost. He cried for the students he'd tried to save and the man he'd been before everything fell apart. And Malia cried too, for different reasons. She cried because she'd found him. She cried because she'd been given the chance to save the man who'd saved her. She cried because sometimes, against all odds, the universe offers us opportunities for grace. The video of their reunion went viral within hours. Millions of views. Thousands of comments. People sharing their own stories of teachers who'd made a difference, of heroes who'd been forgotten, of kindness that had changed lives. The hashtag Who Saved You trended worldwide. It became more than a feel-good story. It became a cultural moment, a reminder of who we should value and who we too often forget. 3 weeks later, Smith Wilson walked into the Carter Foundation headquarters for his first day of work. He'd spent those weeks in temporary housing, receiving medical care, therapy, new clothes. He'd been showered, groomed, and dressed in donated professional attire. But more than his appearance had changed. Something had rekindled in his eyes. A spark of purpose. A memory of who he'd been before the darkness. He was nervous walking into that building, this temple of glass and steel where brilliant young people worked on changing the world. He wondered what he could possibly offer them. He was just an old teacher who'd failed at everything. Malia met him in the lobby. She wore a simple blazer and jeans, not the designer gown from Christmas Eve, just herself. She smiled and squeezed his shoulder. "Ready?" "I don't know," he admitted. "What if I'm not good enough anymore?" "Just be who you were for me," she said simply. She led him to a conference room where 15 young people waited, teenagers from underprivileged backgrounds who were part of the Foundation's mentorship program. They looked at Smith with curiosity and uncertainty. He looked back at them and saw himself reflected in their faces, saw their hunger and hope and fear. Smith took a breath. Then he began to speak. "My name is Smith Wilson. I was a teacher for 30 years. I lost everything, my wife, my home, my dignity. I ended up on the streets, and I thought my life was over. But one of my former students found me on Christmas Eve and reminded me of something important, that the work we do, the kindness we show, the hope we plant in others, it never dies. It grows in ways we can't predict. It blooms in seasons we may never see. And sometimes when we need it most, it comes back to us." He paused, looking at each young face. "I don't know what I can teach you. I don't have all the answers. But I know this, you matter. Every single one of you matters. And I'm here to make sure you never forget that." One of the teenagers, a girl about 14 with wary eyes, raised her hand. "Why should we believe you?" Smith smiled. It was a fair question. "Because I've been where you are. I know what it's like to feel invisible. And I know what one person's belief can do. So I'm going to believe in you, even when you don't believe in yourself. That's my job now. That's what I'm here for." The girl's expression softened. Others nodded. The session began, and Smith found himself falling into the rhythm of teaching again, of listening and guiding and encouraging. It felt like coming home after a long journey. It felt like remembering who he was. Malia watched from the doorway, tears in her eyes. This was why she'd built her empire. Not for the money or the fame or the awards. For moments like this. For the chance to pass on what had been given to her. For the opportunity to close circles that had been left open. Christmas 1 year later. Christmas Eve again. 1 full year since the reunion on the snowy street corner. Malia Carter hosted a dinner at her penthouse. Not a charity gala or an award ceremony, just a small gathering of the people who mattered most. The young men from the foundation were there, laughing and eating and wearing nice clothes that actually fit. Former colleagues of Smith's who'd reconnected with him were there. And at the head of the table, healthy and smiling and surrounded by people who loved him, sat Smith Wilson. He'd gained weight. His eyes were clear. He'd found an apartment he loved, modest but comfortable, filled with books and photos and the life he was rebuilding. Most importantly, he'd found purpose again. Over the past year, he'd mentored dozens of young people, helping them navigate scholarships, applications, personal crises, all the challenges that came with being young and struggling and trying to build a future. After dinner, Malia and Smith sat by the fireplace, watching snow fall outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city sparkled below them, millions of lights in the darkness. "I never got to thank you properly," Smith said quietly. "For what you did. For saving me." Malia shook her head. "You don't need to thank me, Mr. Smith. You saved me first. Everything I have, everything I am, started with you believing in a scared little girl when nobody else did." Smith was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. Then he said, "I've been thinking about that. About what happened on Christmas Eve last year. And I realized something. You didn't save me, Malia. We saved each other." She looked at him, waiting for him to continue. "You gave me back my purpose," he explained. "You reminded me that the work I did mattered. That the sacrifices I made weren't wasted. That even when I lost everything, the kindness I'd shown had survived. You gave me a reason to keep living. So really, we saved each other." Malia smiled, tears gathering in her eyes again. "You saved me first." "Then maybe," Smith said softly, his voice full of warmth and wisdom, "that's how kindness is supposed to work. We save each other, one lunch at a time. We plant seeds we may never see bloom. We believe in people when they can't believe in themselves. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, those seeds grow into forests that shelter us when we need them most." Malia reached over and took his hand. Outside, snow continued to fall. Inside, there was warmth and laughter and the sound of young people dreaming about futures that suddenly seemed possible. A family built not by blood but by sacrifice and recognition and grace. The cycle of kindness, complete. The debt, not repaid because it could never truly be repaid, but honored. And two lives, once separated by 20 years and circumstance, now intertwined forever by the simple truth that saving someone is never a one-time event. It echoes forward and backward through time. It compounds like interest. It multiplies in ways we cannot predict. Smith Wilson had saved a little girl by sharing his lunch. That little girl grew up to save him back. And together, they were saving countless others. One lunch at a time. One kind word at a time. One moment of belief at a time. That's how the world changes. Not through grand gestures, but through small acts of kindness that echo across decades. Through teachers who go hungry so their students can eat. Through billionaires who remember where they came from. Through recognition and reunion and the refusal to let heroes be forgotten. The people who save us are never truly lost. They're just waiting to be remembered. And when we remember them, when we honor them, when we give back what they gave us, we complete a circle that was always meant to be closed.